Good morning, everybody. Hello, thank you so much for being here. My name's Natalie, and I'm the live programme producer here at Welcome Collection. My pronouns are she, her, and for anyone who would like an audio description, I accidentally said I was in my 50s at the last event, but I am in my late 30s, a white woman with wavy hair and a colourful cardigan. So Welcome Collection aims to challenge how people think and feel about health. And we've been really excited to have this conversation today, inspired by the Hard Graft exhibition, which is open downstairs on the ground floor and until the end of April, so exploring work, health and rights. So inspired by that, we're working with the Art Working Parents Alliance on this collaboration with the brilliant Jo, who is sitting here, co-founder. So AWP is a broad networking event which is made up of what the members want it to be. They have events, signposting, campaigning, for lots of kind of working rights, as you might see in the exhibition. So it's free to sign up if anyone's interested. This event is co-produced with Jamila Prowse. So Jamila was due to facilitate today, but she's sadly unwell. But she's been amazing to work with, and we will show a short video from her in a minute explaining how this is the interdependent networks of care in action, as Abby Palmer has amazingly stepped in today, who I last worked with in 2020 on Crypt Casino, which was in the room next door as part of a play weekend. A few housekeeping things is that we're live streaming and also recording, so if you want to ask a question, just bear that in mind. The cameras can only see the backs of your heads. But just bear in mind that it's going to be on YouTube. There is the room next door, which you've seen. If you need to leave, if you want to lay down, relax, or if you've got babies or need to leave at any point, please do feel free. Otherwise, yeah, give me a shout if you need anything. And over to Abigail Palmer. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone, how's it going? I think we're going to play Jamila's introduction first before we get going. If that's okay.
Hi everyone, I'm really sad that I can't be there with you today. Thank you so much to Natalie and to Jo and AWP for all of their amazing work with putting together this event, and to our brilliant speakers, and to Abby for stepping in to host the panel. What we're seeing here is interdependency in practice, that we've managed to find a way for people to step in to support when my health has meant that I can't be with you in person. So it really does epitomize exactly what we're talking about today. And I just wanted to share some of the context that I was thinking about when we started putting together this talk. So I've been an artist for a few years now. Prior to that, I was working in arts organizations in curatorial, administrative and producing roles. And when my health deteriorated due to an exacerbation in a lifelong disability, which I wasn't aware I had at the time, in around 2019, I decided to take a step back from working in arts organizations. I don't think it's something that was ever accessible to me as an autistic person. Working in open plan offices, working a 9-to-5, it's always been something that's made me ill again and again, but it kind of got completely untenable. So I ended up developing an artistic practice as a way to actually have an access adjustment built into my practice. We'll talk about access adjustments in this talk, I'm sure, and it's the idea of the adaptations you might make to your life to make it more accessible, to create a kind of more level footing between disabled and abled people. So I developed an artistic practice that I could do from bed. A lot of the time that meant doing things like hand embroidering from bed, making bigger textile pieces, but always in this much more portable way, where I could do it from my sick bed. I've been intermittently bedbound since 2019 for extended periods of time, but last year I was bedbound for the entire year, signed off on sick leave for the whole year, and my mum, who has taken on the role of my carer over the last few years, had to step in as my full-time carer around her work and other responsibilities. And while I didn't have a physical artistic practice really in that time, the one thing I did do was take photos of myself in and around my sickbed. But other than that, I wasn't practicing. My work and practice was kept alive by the support of my mum and my access support worker, Sophie. And they both oversaw the practicalities of making work. Sophie has edited films in the past. My mum has finished textile works when I've been too unwell to. And they also oversaw the logistical side of things, so managing my emails, having meetings for me. So in the year where I was unable to do anything and completely socially isolated from the world, my art was still being seen. It was still going into galleries, making these trips across different localities when I was unable to, which was this really both frustrating and beautiful thing. But the thing is that Sophie and my mum, Sophie Chapman and Mandy Prowse, are both artists themselves. And so there is this question as to how they maintain their practices around caring responsibilities and support roles, and how this impacts the ways that they create the kind of things that they create. And I became really interested in this idea of formal and informal care networks and the way they might help us to maintain a practice around disability, around caring responsibilities. The artist Donald Rodney, towards the end of his life, established an informal care network that was kind of named Donald Rodney PLC, where when he was hospitalized with sickle cell anemia, he had people supporting him in finishing works. And he also set up that group with the knowledge of his own mortality. And so some of the works that were produced towards the end of his life were actually finished after he died by this group that he set up. So there's this question of the different ways that we might maintain a practice in and around being bedbound, hospitalized, and even after our death. So the question that kind of underlines all of this is, what does it mean to have a practice when you're too sick to make? And what does it mean to have a practice when you have caring responsibilities that take you away from the physicality of that making? Like, how do those two things intersect? So I hope you have a really rich and fruitful discussion today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much to Jamila for that amazing introduction, and we're all wishing you a speedy recovery from the flu. My name is Abby. I'm a white woman in my mid-30s with freckles, and I'm wearing a grey blazer. My pronouns are she, her. So I'm a disabled artist and writer who spends a lot of time thinking about care, but today we have a lot of incredible speakers. So I'm going to try and get out of the way a little bit and just facilitate this much wider discussion. I'm joined by writer Kirsteen McNish, artist and cultural worker Laura Lulika, and interdisciplinary artist Linton, and founder of Shade Media Lou Mensah, who should be appearing on the screen behind us. But I noticed that straight away I've prioritized descriptions. Hi, Lou. Lou is behind us on the screen. I'm prioritizing descriptions that we might see on a CV or a tax return, but a big part of today's discussion will be about unseen labor around disability and parenting, and of receiving and providing interdependent networks of care, which are other forms of identity that kind of get missed when we talk about these things. Shall we jump straight into it? The way it's going to work, we've got a provocation from each speaker, and then we'll have a little chat. There'll be a little break, and then there'll be time for you to ask questions, so do stick around for that. Straight away, Kirsteen, I believe you've prepared a provocation to get us started. Would you mind quickly describing what you look like and your pronouns?
Yeah. My name's Kirsteen McNish. My pronouns are she, her. I'm wearing all black, and I have grey and blonding hair. or greying and blonde hair. This is my provocation. Hello, my name is Kirsteen McNish, and I'm a writer, arts consultant, and events curator, and also the carer of a neurodivergent disabled child whose additional needs define how much support she requires and in turn partly defines my creative practice. We know as women that we face huge systemic barriers to the workplace, lone parents even more so. And being a parent, as we know, is a job that is massively undervalued by society. On top of this, the hurdles one must jump as a carer for a disabled child have ramifications too. So I ask, when does our creative work not get affected by these realities? Here's some stats to frame my perspective. And I'm very aware I don't talk for all carers or all parents of disabled or neurodivergent dependents. I'm merely talking as my non-verbal child's advocate. But this might help frame my perspective. 25% of us, and far more likely to be women, will be doing unpaid caring by our 40s. Further still, the charity Contact a Family estimates that around 620,000 parents in the UK are specifically caring for disabled children. That's 620,000 individuals like myself with aspirations, ambitions and creativity, but often little support to realise all this. And caring, let's face it, stitches society together in all of its forms, barely seen stitches in delicate seams. So the reality is almost all of us know someone in our workplace, street, network, social group or family that has caring responsibilities. And they're often invisible or ignored within the workplace. That's if they are supported enough to integrate into the so-called workforce week to week at all by employers. So access, as we know, is a real issue. Getting adequate care for one's children so we can work is often like finding a needle in a haystack. When carers are found or enablers found, families understandably hold on to these lifelines. So access to work in traditional terms is restricted from the get-go. Once a child is post-18, carers are squeezed even more, especially when school support is no longer there. When many of you will be waving your children off to university, many of us will become full-time carers. So how then do we continue to sustain a career in the arts or elsewhere? We do know now how we can work from home. As freelancers, as artists, writers and musicians, just as the majority of people did in lockdown. Disabled people and carers have known that it's possible for a very long time, but we're rarely supported. As mothers, we often feel othered, but mothers of disabled dependents are often not acknowledged in these discussions in the arts, and if they are, it's often a footnote, a postscript. We need action, not pity. Our children come with much insight that we also want to share, and we want to support their futures. They are as valuable as their able-bodied neurotypical peers. The challenges we meet daily make us very resilient as carers, multi-perspectival, and so is this not a strength? I personally have to be creative at all times with my time, with what I do, how I do it, and with the minimum of resources. Unfortunately, I've often found when trying to make changes with access, the curtains draw, and there is definitely a looking away. When I took it upon myself as an artist to lobby organisations for inclusion, I'm often met with the response, well, in an ideal world, we'd like to do more, but I'm afraid, ... which effectively means carers are pushed away to over there or to hang out together. And whilst this can create strength in numbers or a feeling of being seen, it also contributes to creation of more silos, I'd argue. Camaraderie is one thing, But the reality is that we know what it is to be a parent of a disabled or neurodivergent child. But do our peers and do our employers? My question is, if we can't start with ideals, do we not fall down at the first hurdle? And should the arts lead and not wait for the starting gun? Should our disabled neurodivergent children not be afforded the same opportunities as their able-bodied friends and family, especially after we are not here to advocate and care for them? Access should be for all and not create silos, cliques or clubs. Make sure your collectives are really inclusive collectives. And where you are sure, where you're not sure, ask. People are happy to share. But look for inspiration at artworks in Hastings. Look at the work of artists Sian Davey, Natasha McAvoy, Wando Bezier, musician Ruby Colley. Look at the work of the Para Orchestra. And if you want your exhibitions, arts events and festivals to be inclusive, there is so much work still to be done and also so much to be gained. You don't have to be a utopian dreamer, but we do need a revolution of attitudes. The power is in organisations' hands to change the status quo, just like today. So I would ask artists, writers, curators and leaders of change, test your own edges with access. Are you really making efforts to elevate the work of those that exist outside your own frames of reference? If we put our head above the parapet to elevate others' work that perhaps aren't being afforded the same visibility, status or networks, that's when we're doing the real work. Ask carers to the party, please. Don't put us in a side room and wave from the dance floor. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm really glad that motherhood and matrescence are finally being considered and discussed. I really am. But whilst doing that, we need to tackle how we describe caring too, to my mind. Can we also think about the word carer and how we use this, perhaps so carers are not made more invisible? As the Curie Writing Prize had to make explicit recently, a carer is anyone who looks after a family member, partner or friend who needs help because of their illness, frailty, disability, a mental health problem or an addiction and cannot cope without our support, and the care that they give is unpaid. Can we please apply awareness to how we might use our voices around care rather than somehow drown out the voices by accident or otherwise that might struggle to be heard? I'm finishing now, don't worry. Islands need infrastructure available to connect to the mainland, and all of us need care and connection at some point in our lives to do what we do best. I'd say in the face of war, fiscal collapse and environmental destruction, we simply cannot put people over there anymore, mentally or otherwise. We will all need each other at some point. And as we've seen today with this event, we can do things differently. Care for the carers. And I'd say not least because one day it might also be you if it isn't already. Thank you.
Kirsteen, is it possible to have Laura, your provocation? Would you mind beginning with an image description and pronouns, please?
Hello, I'm Laura Lulika. I am a white person with fluffy orange hair, and I'm wearing probably what could only be described as a flouncy brown and pink outfit. And I use they, them pronouns. My notes are on my phone. Yeah, I'm going to probably just talk from my brain as much as I can and then use my notes on my phone when I need to. So I am a disabled and neurodivergent artist based in Leeds. My practice has changed a lot over the years, and I try to see the ways in which it's changed in response to my health as opportunities to try new things. So I've worked with live performance, sound, sculpture, video, collective work, and I also support a few different arts organisations in developing their accessibility. I am the parent of a 4-year-old with Hang. Hang is my partner. And we also collaborate creatively together. I'm going to have a little look at my notes. So I think that because I spend so much time in bed, when I am able to get up, one of the first things I always want to do is go into my front yard. It's not go to my studio, which is in the corner of my bedroom, and start trying to work. I would always go out into my front yard and try and do like some little gardening jobs. That's kind of like my favorite place to hang out. Me and my 4-year-old hang out there, and we're really lucky to live in an area where there's lots of kids around who play on the street, and it feels, you know, like the 90s when kids hung out on the street together, all different ages. And a lot of them get kind of drawn to the garden, and they sort of joke that it's like the unofficial after-school club, because they'll kind of, you know, they're interested. So we get them gardening, get the chunky chalks out, and it's nice, and it feels like a part of my practice, really, or even like the starting point of my practice is to just like hang out with them, listen to them about how they feel about the neighborhood or what's important to them. And for me, like local community and working together as neighbours and community is like the most important thing before even starting to make art or make anything. So that's kind of like where my practice is at the moment. In our house, I would say that I kind of like refute this idea of like the carer and like sick disabled person binary. I think there's like this misconception that sick and disabled people are just the receivers of care and not the providers of care, when actually the most powerful and impactful demonstrations of care and mutual aid that I've seen have always been from sick and disabled people or people with multiply marginalized identities. And I think that that in our house, that's kind of reflected in the fact that the support that Hang provides to me and that I provide to Hang and that we provide to our child is kind of like this messy, unstructured, kind of like figuring it out as you go along, failing, learning, trying again, sort of process. And it's not the kind of thing where I can like sit on this stage and be like, here's the answer, this is how you do it. Because it's more like, it's just like messy and like a constantly evolving experiment. And I think that I have sort of romanticized my kind of like hermit life and like my solitude enough to the point where I see actually everything as part of my practice. So like the medical admin that I have to do, the hospital trips, the time I spend with my child, everything to me feels like a collaboration and a part of my creative practice. And all of that actually takes up a lot more time than the time that I'm able to spend really making anything. And that sort of helps me, I think, when I have kind of like projects that are sitting on my studio desk in the corner of my room for like months and months and months untouched, that I can tell myself like, no, everything is part of everything. I don't know if there was anything else really that I wanted to say. I think that's probably enough for now. I'll probably jump in with some other stuff later. But yeah, that's me.
So much, Laura. Yeah, that was really interesting to hear about. I believe you also have prepared a provocation. Would you mind describing yourself and pronouns first? Thank you.
My name is Linton. I'm a black person wearing brown corduroy trousers, ASIC running trainers, a brown bowler hat-ish that's felt. I've got a mustache and a small beard on my chin. I've also got a nose ring, and maybe I've got kind of roundish cheeks and a nice smile. I don't know. Yeah, that's me. Any pronouns are fine with me. So I guess thank you for your contributions, everybody. Very inspiring. I think that an increase in care responsibilities for me, I had to unlearn a lot of the capitalist time pressures and objectives that we've been conditioned to believe are right and we need to be striving towards. I find that I usually get a lot of anxiety, and if I try to do too much, and I've learnt recently that if I just don't do some things, then I'm a lot better in myself, because I give myself this huge list of like, I've got to do this and I've got to do that. And being freelance, it's like you believe that you have to, but we don't. And the relief that I get from saying no to myself, or kind of no to work that doesn't fit with my current life, then yeah. Yeah, so this has led me to actually have more belief in my creative practice, because I'm working with the time that I've got. So if I've got 1 hour to make something or get something done or chip away at a project, then that's the time that I've got. And it makes me, yeah, I have more belief in my practice and how I create. What do I create? You may be wondering. I make music and I perform. I also make sound for installations, and I also do community work in an artistic way. So I'll be like a artistic support for like community groups or like school holiday programs. I think I've had the experience of working between music industry and art industry, so different aspects of creative industries. And I think that the music industry needs to catch up with other creative industries. Access documents aren't a thing in music. And I think that understanding different living conditions and access to work just doesn't really exist. I think that touring structures for touring musicians can't fit. It's like a very, I don't know, you have to have a lot of free time, and that is your responsibility to tour instead of having other responsibilities in life. So I think that a certain aspect of people, carers, disabled people, they can't fit inside of these structures. So I'm questioning, how can I, when you see everybody else that is successful doing it in a certain way, how can I exist inside of this thing that it's what I do, you know, and it's the thing that brings me joy, and it's, yeah. And then I feel like this is also reflected in the pay structures. like being paid for a music performance at venues it's not sustainable. I would have to be doing concerts 4 or 5 times a week for me to make any kind of money if the fees are between 50 and £100 a gig, you know? As a support artist and someone that's not like headlining and all of this stuff, someone that's emerging. And I think that the industry is very top heavy. But I must say that some of the best understanding and pay that I've got is from DIY venues and venues that don't have as much money, and they're more understanding and they're more open to discussing the fact that I might need to find someone at home to care for my family while I'm away working, and this is something that I have to pay for, and you know, so it's like, yeah. What was I going to say? I think that there needs to be more collaboration between art and music organizations, in that there's a lot of sharing and learning that they can do from each other. Music industry is worth billions, and it needs to be treated better by the government and the corporations. There needs to be more equity. There needs to be, there's no trickle down. I think that artists should get a living wage for their contributions to society, or we develop working class ecosystems that operate more locally, and we thrive outside of begging for government pots of money. And so in our family we have like an interdependent relationship, and the caring and supporting each other is a job in itself that the capitalist patriarchy dismisses. I think without the support of my family and partner, I don't think I would have the same belief in my art and creativity, and I question myself less because of our communication and our support. I don't have many feedback loops outside of my family. So I think that, I think we've all kind of touched on the similar kind of ideas, but just like one thing that is guaranteed in life that we will all experience is caregiving and disability. It's not something that's talked about enough. So I think that we need to all approach it with more tenacity, because it will affect all of us.
Thank you, Hang, for that. I think I saw quite a lot of nodding and agreement during that. Thank you so much. And finally, we've got Lou. Hi, Lou. It's nice to see you up there. You're on a screen behind us. Would you mind a brief image description and your providing your pronouns and then beginning your provocation, please?
Sure, I'm Lou. Sorry, the audio team, I can just hear a feedback loop. I don't know if you've got that, but I can hear an echo reverberating back from what I'm saying. I'll just check with the team, sorry. I'll continue and we'll see how we get on, but you're not hearing it on your side? Okay, all right. Okay, sorry about that. I'm Lou. I use she, her pronouns. Just to describe myself, I'm in my 50s with brown and grey straightened hair and brown skin. I'm wearing a black top. And apologies for my croaky voice. I'm doing this remotely because I'm recovering from the flu, so apologies for that. I just really wanted to say how much I really value the contributions from everybody so far. Everything that's been said has really resonated with me and my experience of being a carer and being cared for. So I just want to thank everybody on the team for bringing us together, because this has been really valuable to me personally, and I hope it is to everybody else that's involved as well. So my journey with disability and working in the arts specifically started in my 20s. And actually hearing Jamila speak earlier really struck a chord, because our stories overlap in so many ways. Like her, I spent most of my time in my 20s and early 30s bedbound. I was really struggling to work a desk job or live on my own because of my disability. But the difference is, in our experience, is that my diagnosis only came last year, which means that I spent 30 years trying to figure out what I needed, what care I needed, how to ask for it, without really understanding what was going on. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, I became a carer myself. And something really interesting happened to me recently, which struck a chord about my experience as a disabled worker in particular. And that was during a disability benefit appeal, which I'm sure many contributors, they're aware of this process, that quite often you get denied access to benefits that you are entitled to. So you have to go through an appeal process to try and have access to those benefits. And during that process, the assessor wrote something that really summed up my whole experience of working within the arts, actually. And they said, Miss Mensah has developed strategies during her life to cover her disability. This means that this disability is often not fully acknowledged or understood by those with whom she interacts. And that just says so much about how perhaps some disabled people that have invisible disabilities that I sort of did have, they're becoming less invisible now. But that can be our experience, that we have to kind of develop ways of trying to engage with a system that's not meant for us to fit within it. So I've always been adapting, trying to fit into a system that wasn't designed with people like me in mind. And that's kind of contrary to what the arts sector would have us believe, because it can seem that that actually it is very inclusive, but some cases that is the case, but as a worker, it's been a struggle. But I also know that I'm actually pretty lucky to be able to share my story with you today, because I know so many other talented people working within the arts, some in really senior positions, who feel that they have to keep hiding their disabilities, essentially to protect their careers. It's not that they want to stay quiet, but they feel that they have to. And their stories are just buried. So I just want to kind of share that it's not easy for everybody to be able to share their experience in the way that we're able to today. And until very recently, that was me. I was on my own with no formal care network and no informal support either. I had nothing. And that really took its toll, both on my health, my family life, and my work, until eventually I had to give up my photography practice altogether. But when I've been thinking about today and today's talk, I've been thinking about care networks and what happens when you don't have one. And I've been thinking about how our creative energy doesn't just vanish, because we can't make or because we can't do. in the moment because of our disability. You know, our creativity kind of metastasizes. It finds other ways out, and they can either be kind of positive ways, or perhaps, you know, sometimes they can come out in sort of more challenging ways. But I managed to kind of find ways to express myself that fitted the moment that I was in. And I did that by creating Shade Podcast, which allowed me to meet the art world where I was at any given moment. So I can work remotely, sometimes in person, but mostly remotely. And I work with artists and arts organizations, galleries, and I teach at university as well, but I do that remotely. So that's kept me connected to like the people and the work that really matters to me. And since I've had a formal diagnosis and care has started to come into my life in a more sort of practical way, things have really started to turn around for me, which has slowly brought me back to my practice, my photography. And that's really exciting for me because I've not been able to connect with that for a couple of decades in any real way. And I just wanted to say that all of this whole kind of 30-year process that I've been through has taught me so many things. I've got really good at focusing on what matters. I figured out how to communicate clearly when my energy is super limited. I've learned to really stand my ground and understand that my time and my energy are precious, and I need to really manage those carefully. And that's a kind of a two-way process. So people that I work with, you know, that exchange is both ways. So the care is cyclical. And this brings me to something really important about the art sector that I've also been thinking about today. I just want to round up with this thought. That while the arts is often really great at pushing progressive ideas, it's still working within an economic model that pushes its disabled artists or art workers to the margins. Regardless of the shows that galleries appear to be putting on or what accessibility measures they appear to be putting in place. Being able to do creative work is still a privilege that only a few of us can afford to do. And I'm hoping that our chat today will in some way highlight all of the issues that need addressing, so we can kind of counteract that kind of inequality. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Lou, for that. Thank you. Can we have a little clap for all our speakers and their provocations? Thank you. So we've got a few minutes for questions. It's been so interesting to hear all of these themes overlapping. The idea of care is something that we give and we take from, not necessarily. I think the value of disabled participants as in interdependent care feels really important to this. It's been really interesting to feel how capitalism and capitalist models of earning keep coming up over and over again as a way of kind of obstructing that, and we kind of push that to one side and bring care to the foreground. All of these really interesting themes start to emerge. So I'm gonna start with a question and let's see how far we get. At some point in our lives, all of us will either be a caregiver or a care receiver or both, as we've talked about. What do you think, looking at the world, in particular caregiving and parenting through a disability justice lens, gives us? Does anyone want to answer that? Talk about that? It's a big question. Laura?
I think my brain is kind of in response to what Lou was talking about regarding hiding as an adult within workspaces, and it made me think about how we train children to do that from such a young age, and how these structures start so early for kids, and these kind of like enforced behaviors and habits, I guess, and how like the oppression starts so young. I wanted to share a story about something that happened with our family, where our child, our 4-year-old, she was then about 2, was in a nursery, which we thought was going to be a brilliant nursery for her. Turned out it wasn't. It was horrible. And we had a situation where the directors of the nursery were really into like British values, promoting British values, having the police coming in to visit and all this kind of thing. We were like, no, that's not for us. We'll keep her off that day, thanks. They got really angry with us, even though it was kind of like we just explained our reasons why and that it was our choice. And after that, things just got worse and worse.
Yeah, it was also like the fact that kids were getting sick constantly, and it's like we understand that kids get ill right in that environment, but there's things that we could be doing to reduce the transmission, like air filters or whatever it might be, and just like trying to start a conversation around this. It was rejected multiple times, even just a conversation, you know? So it's like these difficulties just kept on.
Yeah, sort of snowballing, and then there was issues also around racism within, like, between children, and also one of the directors made a comment to you about wearing a pro-Palestine flag pin badge as well. So all of these things kind of snowballed. We're like, yeah, we're out. Thank God we're out. Then months later, we get a phone call from the benefits fraud team, and the directors of the nursery had gone online and collected information about us from our Instagram profiles and reported us for benefit fraud. And I was like so shocked, and it, you know, completely sent me into a spin. I mean, I've got other disabled friends who've experienced this kind of thing, like online bullying and having people like reporting them for benefit fraud wrongly. But it made me very paranoid, made me very aware of what we share online and the kind of risks that we take as, you know, the expectation of artists to be like somewhat public facing. And it's one of the first things we actually talked about when Natalie and Jamila invited us. I was like, because when they mentioned that we're going to be filmed, it's going to be live streamed, there's going to be a recording. And now all of these things, you know, I'm like hyper aware, basically. But also just thinking about that from the perspective of the children is that these people work with little kids every single day, and they are completely operating from like a police mindset. And it's very shocking that there are, you know, children are like the biggest marginalized group in the world, and the oppression of them starts so young, if not instantly. And as adults, we're just constantly failing them. And we see that on different scales, from like the situation that happened with us to like the multiple genocides that are happening around the world. And so, yeah, just in response to what Lou was saying about having to hide, I just was thinking about how do we combat this? How do we like approach abolition, you know, with gusto, like from the beginning. So yeah, that's kind of like where my brain was at, my headspace is at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's such a horrible story. I'm so sorry. I guess one of the things it brings up is this idea of the push and pull between the freeing of finding a new identity or speaking from within an identity if, for instance, we talk a lot about access docs for artists in art. It's to explain what those are. briefly, if you have an access document, it was just described initially as sort of like a rider that you'd have as a musician. So it comes from band cultures. We pass them to arts organisations that we're working with, and it's a list of things that might make working as a disabled practitioner slightly easier. But then, Hang, you talked about in music, that rider system doesn't exist anymore, and I guess I'm just thinking a little bit about this experience of coming out and expressing your needs, or being unable to hide your identity and just existing in space, and how scary that can be. Kirsteen, how has that been for you as a carer of a disabled child? Having to advocate for yourself.
I think, of course, I got relaxed then, I forgot. I think it has entirely changed me, but for the better in lots of ways, but it is a perpetual battle that you're never quite prepared for, no matter how much you think you are prepped. It's almost like, I described it to a friend, it's almost like you've got this incredible, in my personal situation, you know, I've got a daughter who's 15. I've learned so much from her. I think in a world that is outward looking and obsessed with the kind of echelons, the higher echelons of things, actually what she has taught me is to take time, to look at things slowly. And also, she's taught me a lot about how society is failing us. And, you know, I feel that it's almost like, I was saying to my friend the other day, it's like I have to put armour on. I feel like I'm putting armour on in order to just go out there and talk about anything to do with her. And as a person, I'm quite soft and gentle, but I'm fierce as hell when it comes to her. And, you know, and issues around inclusion. So it does change you. It's inevitable that it changes you. But it's also, like you were saying earlier about this, it's not about division even within this. You know, it's not about the cared for and the caregiver or the disabled person. And all of this is a blend. But I think we've got a lot of work to do, and I think that's evident from everyone here and what everyone said. And I really hope, I think, unfortunately, quite often when these discussions come up, it's silos, it's kind of over there, it's kind of, we want to be part of the chorus. You know, just because my daughter doesn't contribute to capitalist society in the traditional sense, it doesn't mean that she hasn't got value. And so I guess that's really how it's affected me. It's affected me in a multiplicity of ways, but it's also enriched me. I just wish there wasn't so many battles, because I'm sure all of us here just want to be and get on with our creative work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I add to that
that's
as well?
Such a beautiful point. Oh yeah, go ahead, Lou.
Yeah, I've just been having a thought about that, because I'm just thinking how the things that we learn are just so useful to just caregiving and parenting as a whole, when you look at caregiving through a disability justice lens. And I'm just thinking about how that vulnerability that we've all been expressing and this interdependence that we have, just to realize that they aren't weaknesses, you know, to care for others, to receive care, to ask for help. They are still perceived as weaknesses, but they're not. You know, these are natural states of being human. I've learned that we can sort of acknowledge and accommodate our different needs very openly, but when we do that actually it benefits everyone, not just disabled people. I think as a whole it just creates a more humane and flexible set of systems that we move within, that we live within, that recognize the full spectrum of human experience, which we are still not doing. And in terms of caregiving and parenting, the disability justice lens helps us sort of move towards more responsive ways of supporting each other. And I just think it just validates different ways of providing care. Care, as everybody else has said, is work, it's labour, and it deserves support and recognition. And that's why, again, like, it's amazing that the Wellcome Collection has held this discussion today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for that. I'm going to end with one very quick question. Given how precious time becomes around caregiving and receiving, what is it that keeps us returning to our creative practice? Laura, you talked about how the two things are so intertwined. What is it that that creativity keeps you returning to that?
I think for me, I've tried to work other kinds of jobs, and I've even tried to work jobs that feel like they could be integrated with my practice, like working at community gardens or working at after-school clubs, things like that. But unfortunately, working, like, even within kind of organizations that want to benefit the community, they're still working within state-funded restrictions, and it's still within like a capitalist framework, and it's become unsustainable for me, especially recently, because I've been signed off from working, especially like any kind of physical work. And so it's the kind of work that I am able to do. Yeah. I would be able to do more of it if I had more support. I don't have any kind of like formal carer. It's just our kind of like messy figure it out situation. And yeah, it's just, I don't know how to not be creative or not be an artist. It's just like how I approach everything. And I think that like gardening, everything, like it's all part of it. Everything is part of everything. And like when you think about care and you think about gardening, like they're the same things, you know. And so yeah, that's just like from my perspective. That I don't know how to approach it in any other way, or be any other way.
Thank you. Han, what about you?
Yeah, I guess for me, I've also tried lots of different types of jobs. I've done all sorts. I've worked in pubs, I've done call centre work, I've worked in kitchens, offices, I've been a tour guide, I've done all sorts. And I just don't think that... I think it took me a long time to actually kind of understand what makes me happy in myself. It was a long journey, but if I think about it, I've always been creative from like a very young age. I've always had an interest in music and drawing, and I think what we were talking about earlier, like Laura talking about the structures that are put on you from when you're a child, and like I was telling myself I have to get a degree in something important, you know, and like I have to get a job that is well paid and in an office and whatever, you know. It's like, it's just like the thing that it's the only thing that you see. So it's like, okay, yeah, that's what I need to do. But then it's made me, I don't know, like, yeah, going to university just made me realize that if I carried this on, I'd be miserable when I was 40, you know, like, so I had to start exploring something that actually connects with me. And yeah, so I think that like, it's just what makes me return to it, or at least be happy with what I'm doing, is that it feels true to me, and it brings me joy. And yeah, and I think that like we all have that thing that we can connect with in that way.
Yeah.
And we should all explore it in whatever time we have. If that's like half an hour, 20 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it might be. But yeah.
Thank you so much. Kirsteen, what keeps you returning to your own creative practice?
I guess since my daughter was born, I think we're all chameleons. We're having to constantly kind of flex, and workplaces don't flex. So freelancing was the most obvious thing for me to do. And I have done a multitude of things that within the arts, whether that's events curation, working with artists to try and develop their careers, and latterly arts consultancy, and latterly writing, because writing was something, being a working class person, I never thought that the arts were for me. And I think that that's true of a lot of young people these days, because they can see obvious kind of barriers within the infrastructure. You only need to look around an art gallery opening to get a sense of who feels they should be there or shouldn't be there. And I think for me, art was something I was always interested in. So since I had my daughter, I guess writing became the thing that I'm not one of those writers that sits down. There's nothing wrong with it. I just don't have the opportunity to sit down at 9 o'clock every morning and work solid for 12 hours. And thoughts come to me between emptying the bins or arranging multiple medical appointments. But what it does is it does enrich me, but it's not catharsis. And when I talk about anything in relation to my daughter and care, which I didn't used to. I used to allude to things. Now I'm much more specific, because I think that's actually drawing a chalk circle that people can step into. So for me, it's everything is creative. Like my friend Molly said recently, everything is creative practice. And but that is a blend, and it isn't always in these constructed notions of how creativity should be.
That is exactly right. Thank you so much, Kirsteen. We're going to take a 5-minute break now. I wanted to thank everyone who's spoken. I'd love another little round of applause or a finger waggle for everyone. Thank you so much. We're going to have a little wee and a little cup of tea. We'll be back in 5 minutes. That will be at around 12 minutes past 12. If you're joining online, you can ask questions via the chat and have a think about your questions for a few minutes. See you in a bit. Ready? Are we back on? Yeah. Okay, everyone. It's now your chance to get involved in the conversation. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
So everything that's been said has really resonated with me. As I have an autistic stepson, and my wife and I really, a lot of our time, an inordinate amount of time and energy, we spend supporting him. He's an artist. He's a computer games developer, and but has high needs for support. And so one of the things that resonated with me was the idea that we're in silos and that we're up against authorities, like you mentioned. They sort of insist that you have to justify why you're in receipt of this or that benefit, for example. And I can only speak for myself, but my experience has been, it's been a hellish experience having to deal with authorities like the ICB in my case, or in our case. But I'm going to speak for myself. And the experience is one of dealing with people who are really acting, it seems, in really bad faith and not understanding what we're dealing with, and what our son is dealing with. And I sort of, but we're in a silo because we're here talking about it, but they're not represented here. So what can we do to educate the authorities in social care and within the NHS to recognise and appreciate and value creativity and support individuals and support carers like us and like my wife, you know, to basically be able to continue and to enable people to flourish who have needs.
Yeah.
And to be creative, you know, for them to be open. I'm completely creative with what I do with my son. He has 24/7 care. I manage all of it. I employ everybody. They're all artists and musicians, and he's a games maker and a games designer and a musician and an artist, you know, and all that stuff. But they just don't get it, you know. Fortunately, I've got project artworks now getting involved, which is fantastic.
What can we do?
How can we get them to be more creative?
We were just talking about it in the little break. And personally, I believe that there's a lack of working class creative people that actually make it to the top of the structures that are in these controlling situations. And I think, like, if there were more working class creative people contributing to how things are developed and integrated into the process, so that the people are integrated into the process, so that these thoughts and ideas get integrated before and are part of the structures instead of being side thoughts. That's personally how I think. It's an easy step that we can take, that people can come in and consult, or people can come in and support in developing new ways to approach these things.
Yeah, so like making them decision makers. Yeah, exactly. In the process. Yeah. I was thinking, from my perspective, I felt like sort of differently. Actually, I feel like we're expecting too much to imagine that people who want to be police to not be police. Like, they want that. I don't know how to change that, actually. And I would say that, like, I'm just being honest. Like, after you deal with enough of them, and they exist everywhere. Doctors are police, social workers are police. They're all police. Even people who run nurseries, apparently. So it's like, and you can keep telling them about themselves. I mean, that's what we did with the nursery directors. And, you know, you like try and do it politely and like do it on their level, you know, and like write a nice letter, but like make your points and all that kind of thing. Or you can get angry, and like there's so many different ways you can try. But I think it's almost like too much to expect, and it might be more productive to actually find the people that are on the same wavelength as you, have the same ideas as you, collectivize, work together, create support networks. And I know that's like additional labor, but to me it's like I would like to have as little to do with the police as possible and the people with police mindset, and put my energy into working more with people who don't have that mindset and want to support each other. And I think that's something that I noticed, like within our neighborhood. It's very working class, but like everybody is supporting each other. All the neighbours are super friendly with each other. We all watch each other's kids. It's like, and we all want as little to do with the police as possible.
Yeah, I guess it's like interesting because now you've just made me think about how like we can develop our own ecosystems. Like, it is a possible thing. And I think that like, what did you say, sorry, when we were talking? Sorry, it was like,
But not having to do all the work as well. I mean, I think this is the thing. It's just like, it's this perpetual feeling that we can't just be. We're having to educate all the time. We're having to fight. We're having to perpetually point out to people that they're actually turning a blind eye. And I think part of what you're saying is ostensibly that people you can choose to engage. You know, people can choose to engage, and certainly the responsibility, to my mind, within the arts sector is that they have to, because, you know, the arts traditionally has always led. And I kind of feel like if the upper echelons aren't engaging in this, and whilst it's great to be with other people and to, you know, and create our own networks of care, it's also about not having to try and infiltrate all the time. You know, we're not, we shouldn't be doing all the work. You know, and for instance, within the writing community, there's lots of people talking about particular things, but they're not inclusive. And there's plenty of writers that write about disability justice. There's plenty of people that are carers. Put those people on your shoulders, because they don't have the same networks as you. And I think that is absolutely essential. You know, I think it's exhausting doing what we're doing all the time, you know, and having to justify, like my daughter has Down syndrome, is severely autistic, she has very, you know, a multiplicity of additional needs. I know that once she turns 18, I'm going to have to keep proving that. I mean, really, it's not going to change. So our burden, you know, isn't our dependence. We are not a burden. It's society that needs to start flexing, and it's really overdue.
Yeah, the little bits of paper you have to fill in are the cops as well, aren't they? They're the police.
Yeah, endless.
Yeah, I think we've got a question from online.
I'm just going to amalgamate a couple of questions that may have a crossover. So, has anyone experienced the intersection of race affecting the ability to give and receive care structurally? And relatedly, what advice would you give to a disabled global majority artist for applying for grants, funds and commissions? Should we state our identities? Two in one.
Yeah, I guess regarding like stating identities and your situations, I've always felt weird about it, because I don't want to be like a tick box of like, we've got to make sure we have X amount of inclusion. So I want to be valued for my art and creativity in the forefront, but then I also like got to get paid. So, you know, it's like, I don't know, like, it's like, I don't know, it's also been a long time where these kinds of opportunities haven't been accessible to people from the global majority, or, you know, so if me saying that's what I am, because it is what I am, and the opportunity comes, then it comes, you know. But yeah, I don't know, it's certainly a weird feeling, and I've had to get over it, but I just don't really think about it anymore. In that, like, if it's something that they're asking for, then yeah, it is what I am. But then I guess like the other good thing is that there are lots of opportunities now that are specifically targeted for people from the global majority, which is also nice. Yeah, I can't remember the start of the question. It was race and...
also about race affecting ability to give and receive care structurally.
That's like a really heavy question. I think that as someone racialized, you're kind of, I think that you are expected to be okay compared to a lot of other people. I think that in general, like, just kind of the perceptions of society, it's either you're forgotten about or not even really considered. Yeah, so I guess that would... Yeah, I don't really know where I'm going, but it's hard. It's a difficult thing to navigate. I think that the thing that has helped is being able to talk with other people who experience the same things, and also engage with local communities that celebrate these aspects of society. There's lots going on in Leeds that, and lots of very active people within the community that celebrate and support global majority people, and provide events that, like similar to what Laura was saying, where it's like the community is contributing and part of the process and making the decisions that also affect and support the people around. And I think the more that we have of this, the better we'll be. That was me winging it, but...
Thank you.
I was just going to add briefly to that, in relation to like what happened with us with the nursery. I think one of the things that makes it more shocking is one of the reasons we chose this nursery is because it's in Chapeltown in Leeds, and Chapeltown is historically the neighbourhood where they had the first people from the Windrush generation move there. It's a historically African Caribbean area. They also host the Caribbean Carnival, which was the first one in Europe. And I think when you look at the nursery and what they did, especially within that context and the way that they interact with the local community, makes that even more problematic. And yeah, I think it's something that, like, when in regards to like when we look for care for our child, that's something like race and the like community that is going to be part of caring for our child is something that we take into consideration.
Lou, I think you wanted to speak as well.
I just wondered if I could just quickly add to that. I just think that that question's a really important one, and a lot of my work and conversations that I hold through the podcast are with artists who are continually kind of trying to manage the challenges of that question that the participant put forward. And I think part of the way of dealing with that is accepting, you know, that as Black, global majority, marginalized peoples, the fact is that we do live in this kind of state of duality at all times, living in a society, say like the UK, for example, or white majority society or community. And I always go back to this kind of idea that W.E.B. Du Bois posed, is that as Black people, we're living in this state of double consciousness. Okay, so we're kind of living amongst ourselves, in our silos, you know, as our authentic selves. But that goes on behind this kind of veil that we are that we are ourselves, this veil. And then on the other side of this veil is society, white society, and how we're expected to behave. And just managing that constant duality is something that is always going to be a challenge. And I think just accepting that that is part of our experience kind of makes it easier to process, but it's a very difficult challenge, and it's one that all marginalized people have to manage in one form or another. And I think having conversations, having a comfort within a space where we can feel safe amongst ourselves to kind of give us the tools we need to go beyond that veil, back into sort of society, kind of makes life a little bit easier, especially work life and life in the arts. I hope that's some kind of answer, but that's how I look at it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we're coming to the end now, but I just wanted to say that this has been such a beautiful conversation. I feel like we've only really scratched the surface, but what I'm hearing from all of this conversation is that we have these failing infrastructures that are failing all of us. and when you kind of like pull outside of that and scratch away and make room for that creativity, for that care, and for that tenderness, I think I'm not saying that's a conclusion, but that doesn't solve the massive failures. But we do need to hold. It sounds like we need to hold space for that and to keep prioritizing that in our life, as well as the work that needs to be done infrastructurally of offering that support. But the system will continue to fail us, I guess, and it's just really beautiful to hear other ways of tending to each other and providing that care and what that brings to our creative practice. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of our speakers. Thank you to Laura, thank you to Hang, thank you to Kirsteen, and thank you to Lou. Thank you so much to Jamila for organising this, and to Joe Harrison and the Art Working Parents Alliance. And a big thank you to you, the audience, both here in person and online, for sharing your thoughts and questions. We're gonna break out into the into the breakout room now. Yeah. Oh, okay. We're not all doing that. You're not all invited. Sorry. Speaking of silos, yeah. Thank you so much for coming today, and let's keep on talking.
Thank